we lost touring opportunity because no one could tour, so we basically had to immediately go back into writing mode, which was fine. And, we like that. But as far as a career trajectory and in the traditional way of release an album and at least try to tour a little bit, we kind of got, that path didn't happen for us.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, my name is Scott Hoffman, and I play guitar in the metal band Nite.
Scott, welcome back.
Thank you.
You and your bandmate Van were nice enough to take a lot of time to have a very in-depth conversation about Nite 3 years ago, back when you guys released your second album, Voices of the Kronian Moon.
Yeah.
So I believe the last time we spoke, you guys described Nite as blackened heavy metal.
Hmm.
Is that still true?
Yeah, I think we've settled on that both because it's true, but also because for good or ill, you need branding of some sort. You need to have, even if no one, no artists want to pigeonhole themselves, but you got to describe it. What if you run into somebody, it's like, oh, what's it sound like? You have to have a sound bite or something, to tell people. So I think it serves a purpose there for sure. It's a style, and I think it's true. I mean, it's for as much as those couple words mean. I think musically, it's very, in some ways, traditional. It's very rooted in the influences of 80s heavy metal, but trying to update it in our own way. And then the blackened part comes from, obviously, Van's vocal style is a harsh vocal, along the lines of, it's not any one thing, but, similarities to Greek black metal bands, any Norwegian black metal bands, what have you. And that gives it this, darker feel that you wouldn't have if you had a traditional melodic singer.
And the last time we spoke, we really went, down deep into the weeds as far as like, what is heavy metal and what makes, Nite heavy metal, and what makes it traditional, what makes it modern.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like since both you and Van are guitar players,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like a lot of the style that we consider heavy metal, maybe the style that's intrinsic to Nite, is based around that twin guitar approach?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like that's such a, not that, plenty of amazing and classic heavy metal is one guitar, of course, Ozzy and Van Halen and a million other examples. But I think what we do certainly draws from the very, well-known arena of like, Maiden, Priest, get right off a million bands, Thin Lizzy, whatever, like so many twin guitar bands. And because back to the kind of branding, the blackened heavy metal thing, since the vocals in our band don't carry a melody and they are a harsh vocal, the guitars are the melody. So basically all of the melodic hooks are delivered with guitar melody. So that's a key thing, and that is rooted in Halloween and Maiden and Gamma Ray and stuff, except our approach is, at least compared to those common touchstones, it's certainly darker and a little more modern.
Yeah. Well, as far as the modern side and the black metal influence, do you feel like Nite would still be Nite if you guys had a different vocal approach?
Ooh, good question. I don't think so. I mean, that's a great kind of hypothetical. It would still be traditional heavy metal, but it definitely wouldn't be Nite as we know it. It would be, I think, even it would be familiar in a way that we hope that we aren't, if that makes sense. Like, we're not that we're doing, something that maybe never been done, but we do think we stand out and we have an individual style. And if we had a melodic singer, it would be tough to not maybe blend in more with, because there are a lot of great bands doing, 80s influenced heavy metal with a talented melodic singer. And that's the template. That's a great thing. I love all that music and I listen to tons of it, but there are a lot of bands and it does, get hard to differentiate unless you have a really unique vocalist, melodic or otherwise. So yeah, good question. I think Nite as we like it and as we want it to exist is very much tied with, Van's vocal delivery.
So when we last spoke, it was 2022.
Mm-hmm.
You guys had released your second album. What have you been up to since then?
It's slower than we thought. I think that's how many things go. But we're obviously working on the third album that's about to come out March 14th. But yeah, in that time, I'm trying to remember the exact. I'm bad with dates, but the second album came out, Voices of Kronian Moon. We didn't do a lot of touring, not for lack of trying, but it's just hard with schedules and opportunities that come up. But we did a little bit of touring in the Western US, and fair share of regional Bay Area, California, San Francisco Bay Area shows where the band's based. And yeah, and then obviously we have lives, so we're busy with our families and jobs and things, but really focused on the third album. We had a lot of time to polish it, and I think that paid off. Yeah, we put in a lot of work and refined as much as we could without, hopefully, it's a risk of overthinking it. Sometimes you can spend too much time on something, but I think it was time well spent. We kind of had an earlier draft of the album that was good, but we ended up scrapping, a third of it or something, and kind of revisiting. And I think we ended up with a cooler final record.
I do want to talk about your process of scrapping material.
Mm-hmm.
I think we spoke about last time. But your first album came out in 2020, and that's when the world shut down for a few years.
Yep.
And then your second album came out just as bands were going back on tour again, and things were
right
kind of getting back on track in terms of like festivals and tours and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that hurt the band's momentum?
I think so. We haven't maybe analyzed that a whole lot, or because I guess what good would it do? But it's definitely something we've talked about, and it's just, it was just weirdly, unlucky timing with the first album coming out. I think literally it was like within weeks of the initial main COVID shutdown, and then just we lost touring opportunity because no one could tour. So we basically had to immediately go back into writing mode, which was fine, and we like that. But as far as a career trajectory and in the traditional way of release an album and at least try to tour a little bit, we kind of got that path didn't happen for us. So that's a good point. But we're trying to make up for it now. We do have some stuff lined up for this album, and hopefully, I think the second album did get us back on track a little bit, and Season of Mist too. That was the second album, was the first one on Season of Mist. They're obviously, a bigger indie with a lot of reach, and their push, certainly helped us reach a wider audience.
Yeah. I mean, live is where you guys really, really want people to experience the band, right?
I mean, both are, important parts of the band. Yeah, we love to. I mean, we enjoy playing live. We were never meant to be it's not a project band. It is a traditional band with for people to go out and play shows. So we want to do that. So hopefully more will happen on this album.
When you guys were touring Voices, did you get a chance to go over to Europe?
No, we have not been to Europe yet at all, which is a bummer. And, a little bit ironic because Van, our main songwriter, is originally from Greece. So we even have a deeper connection than a lot of US bands. But yeah, it's a constant goal, and we're doing our best to make it happen. But, for a variety of reasons, we just haven't had the right offers. And, it is financially difficult to get over there. You usually need a festival or two to kind of anchor it. And we just haven't had the right, I guess, combination of things come together.
So the last time we spoke, we had a really in-depth conversation about your songwriting process. If I'm remembering correctly, Van will start a song, but you guys will work on it together.
Yeah. And that's true. And he's by far the main engine of the songwriting, and he presents basically finished demos. I mean, not that we don't change them, but what we're spoiled in that he really does have usually a whole vision of at least the initial concept of the song, and it's presented in a fairly polished format because he's a super talented audio engineer. So his demos sound like a lot of bands' albums. They may not have vocals, that's often comes later, but like the music will be with programmed drums, will be pretty much there. And then the rest of us, me, Pat, and Avi, are more, we're encouraged to write, but we serve more, I think, as a sounding board and as a refining tool. Like we respond to certain things, this part's working, this part's not, like, arrangement stuff, let's shorten this, let's add more, this feel is all the same, maybe we need a different section, to break it up. So we act as like a guide or almost like a surrogate audience in that way. Not that we're not allowed or like we're not prohibited from adding our own riffs and our own parts, but the sound of Nite is, at least currently, so much Van's kind of particular style and particular way he writes on guitar, and that it's not super easy to kind of just smash some, here I have this cool thrash riff or something, you can't just throw it in the pot. So it's not a grab. Or some bands are more of a grab bag riff bands, which I like and that can work too. But the compositional style is a little more tightly woven for Nite, and so far it's worked for us to kind of let Van do almost all of that and then just help him refine it. And also from that's on the song level, and then at the album level, some bands only write the songs that go on the album and that's it, and they just work on those, and some bands write way more songs, and we're more that style. Like Van demos way more songs than actually get on the album. And so part of the job that we help with is also like, what's the best stuff, like, and everyone's gonna have a different take on what their favorite is, and then we kind of get the consensus of what are the 8 or 10 best ones.
I mean, that's wild to me. You guys mentioned that the last time as well, like you scrap a lot of material. Mm-hmm. And at this point, 3 albums in, it sounds like you almost have a full album of songs that nobody's heard yet.
Oh, I mean, it's wild to me even, and I'm on the inside of it. Like, Van's a very prolific, talented writer, and yeah, we have. I'm not saying they're all like finished, polished songs, but some of them are. And yeah, I would say there's almost an album for every album. Like you could have one in between with the discarded. And that's not to say that, of course, some of it gets reused. Sometimes we'll be like, oh, what happened to all these working title things? What happened to that one from the last cycle? Like let's drag that out. And not a lot of it does, but definitely some parts. There are some on the new album that we kind of, not in whole, but in part, like resurrected. So yeah.
Would you guys ever release an EP of some of the stuff that hasn't been released yet?
Maybe. We've talked about, nothing too concrete or serious, but we've talked about different concepts for EPs, like, for the, like, I think like most bands, you think about it when you're like, well, there's either time reasons to do it. It's like, well, I don't have we haven't put out anything for a while, and, we want to just get some fresh material. So that can be a big motivator, or more of a creative motivator of like, oh, we have these ones that maybe didn't fit with the album, but we really like them, and they maybe won't fit with the next album either. So you kind of put it in an in-between release. So I would say that's probably more likely someday. Not sure when, but and we've also talked about covers. That's a common thing to maybe throw in an oddball cover or something amidst a couple new ones. So yeah, good question. I don't know. Can't say with certainty we'll do it, but it's definitely been talked about.
Just
So at the time we're having this conversation, the third Nite album will be released at the end of the week.
Yes.
It's called Cult of the Serpent Sun, and it'll be out through Season of Mist Records.
Yes. Very excited.
How would you compare this album to the previous two?
What we've been telling, as we've been doing a round of interviews for the promotion, and also kind of not that we had a clear plan or like a very super strict vision, but we do kind of talk about once one album comes out, what is the next one? Just to start from. It doesn't mean we're going to follow an exact plan, but you have to have some parameter, or even just an image or a spirit or a word to kind of focus on to get you going. And for this one, we started off talking about, we wanted to be a little darker, a little maybe more aggressive. And in the earlier discussions, we talked about being more street, which I don't even know what that means really, but I think to us it meant like back alley, almost like a crime movie or a gritty comic book or something. But I don't know if all that translates, and it definitely morphed as we went along. But I do think, we'll see what the fans and the general audience thinks, but from our inside perspective, I do think it is darker and a little more aggressive. Not that it doesn't have the melody that's been key to our sound, and it's not the same as the first record, which was darker than the second one. So it's not like we're going backwards either, but it's darker in a different way. That sounds vague, but yeah, it's a little more, it's culty to, it's in the title. It does have a little bit of a cult in the occult kind of vibe. It has a little bit of a mystery to it, a little bit of a foreboding sense, in between also some triumphant and kind of soaring parts too. But there's a little more rhythm to it, a little more percussiveness. So yeah.
The last time we spoke, we talked about, not necessarily from the band members and from you guys as songwriters, but maybe like audience reactions of, well, this isn't heavy metal. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like people having a very boxed in view of what you can or can't do as a metal band. Mm. Does that affect you guys at all as songwriters? Do you ever feel like some of your stuff maybe go too far in a melodic direction or in an atmospheric direction?
It has. I guess we have thought about it insofar as, we're not trying to self-edit too much, but because you want to, just let the ideas flow and be what they're going to be. But we will sometimes pull back and be like, is this too, for an example, we'll be like, is this too proggy? Like, are we getting too far out? And not that it's okay to be prog. Like, we love that stuff. And it's just, you try to refine, well, what are we trying to say? What is the mood of the music we're trying to do? And I think that's where the maybe intentional edit comes in, where you're like, well, we like this part, but now this song has now drifted into a different place. That it's not that it's not metal, or it's whatever that means, but it's less focused from what the song was meant to do. And that's not to say we won't maybe get proggier on future ones. That's a way we could grow or expand. But for this one, we wanted to be tight and focused, shorter songs, and a little more to the point, I think.
Speaking of proggy, is this a concept album?
It is not, but it does, in the sense that there's no story or through line or characters or any grand central idea. But I think it's vaguely, I think all the albums, and Van could speak more to this because he's also the primary lyric writer, although we all contribute, but it does have a vaguely unified mood. It does have this, like I said, a darkness and a cult, but also some of the central Nite themes, just darkness. And the band's name is Nite, and just the power of that. Yeah. So not a concept album, but kind of a similar feel throughout.
Yeah. Maybe an immersive experience, except not necessarily like a narrative to it.
Right. Yeah. There's no defined narrative, but hopefully the songs do kind of feel connected in a way, that you do want to sit down in one sitting and kind of get through them all.
The hooded figure on the cover of the album, is that the same figure on all three albums? Yeah,
that's our mascot, I guess, for lack of a better word, although it's not as maybe as in your face as in Iron Maiden Eddie or similar, but it's Nyx, NYX, which I should know this better, but I believe it comes from Greek mythology, and it's a goddess of the night, and I think other things. It's not as simple as that, but yeah, this is something we adopted early on and have tried to keep as a through line in our album art and in a lot of our merch or t-shirts and things. So yeah, it's a, this hooded figure, and it for us is connected to that mythology of the nighttime and so forth. So the new album, the artwork, it's a little, we're kind of trying to tweak the formula a little bit. There's almost like a skeletal face that shows through in under the hood, and before it was definitely nothing. So we're just trying to keep it interesting.
It's funny on the visual side and the visual identity of a band. It's not really something that I thought about until fairly recently, but like a lot of those old bands, Motorhead had Snaggletooth, like you mentioned, Iron Maiden had Eddie. That was a big part of it, like having a character or figure that you associate with the band,
yep,
and not necessarily the band members.
Mm-hmm. And even like, I'm branching off a little here, but like even just having an iconic something, Alice Cooper has the eye makeup. That, it's not a mascot, but he's kind of the mascot in that sense. And, AC/DC has Angus in the schoolboy uniform. Like it's a immediately recognizable visual thing. And like, it takes different forms, but yeah, it's wild how, Halloween has the pumpkins, like there's all these things that you can do. And yeah,
I mean, Ozzy dressing up as like a werewolf or like an insane asylum, not every
right.
cover.
But yeah, he kind of changed it. That's true. Yeah, he kind of, I guess Ozzy in some sense is the mascot. But yeah, he's almost like their Eddie because he was in a different costume each time. But yeah.
So as you mentioned, Van is an engineer and a producer.
Mm-hmm.
He's worked on all your albums. As far as the difference between the demos and the finished product, do you guys re-record everything from scratch when you're recording the album?
Ooh, excellent question. To a degree, I guess, and I'm not sure it's the same for every track, but the general idea, I think you could say, watch Van, hopefully Van doesn't find me being inaccurate here. I think this is true. You could say that, so like say the demo, it exists in a DAW or a digital audio workstation, like all the, everyone has one Cubase or, Pro Tools, whatever you use, it doesn't matter. But, it exists in that format. It's recorded. Like I said, they start off often with digital drums, and then Patrick, our drummer, of course, replaces them with his own drums, and not just playing them. Some of it's close to what was programmed, if it's very important, to have that feel or that concept. But he, of course, adds his own flavor and sometimes changes it completely. He's like, I think this beat would work better here, etc. So, but to your question, I think it's true that a lot of times that skeleton, like that, almost like the container, that file, song one dot, track, whatever, kind of continues from the beginning to the end. So it starts in the demo stage, and then we're just essentially replacing the whole thing throughout. So the only thing that really remains is the click track and like the tempo and so forth. But in some sense, that's the germ, and it just kind of continues. So, but does everything get re-recorded? I would say yes. Maybe some of the quote unquote demo guitars, if Van thinks that they're usable, because they were probably re-recorded as dry, just the dry signal that you can reamp or change the sound of later. That's not like mic'd, amp. Some of those might stay if they don't need to be tweaked. But I would say on average, probably everything gets re-recorded because we, want to try different guitars or different sounds or what have you.
Did you record this in Van's home studio?
Yeah, actually all of our albums, all three, have been done in sort of a combination of our rehearsal room that we'll set up mics for the drums and so forth. And then either there or like at, Van's home studio. I don't think this is any secret or anything, but we do a lot of it with like at least the guitars and the bass. We do a lot of plugins, like no actual mic cabinets. We did use some mic'd, traditional loud amps on this one, on the new album, mixed in. But Van is no stranger to kind of like the modern technology and not shy about it. Like there's, I think if you go back even a couple of years, there was maybe more stigma about like, oh, like you can't just use, digital plugins and stuff to get your sound. But I think quickly that has mostly fallen away, and a lot of albums are all digital, and you wouldn't know because the technology is caught up. The modeling is so good that you can't tell a digital Marshall from a loud in the room Marshall.
Yeah. Van mentioned something the last time, which I don't think a lot of people confuse production with genre. If you know what I mean. You know, like especially when it comes to black metal, having that very trebly,
Right.
raw sound, and confusing that with the actual like musicianship or instrumentation. And he said something to the extent of, he could make Nite sound like whatever he wants. Just through the production without changing any of the
Actual the
actual,
writing, yeah.
yeah. As far as the production of this album, do you feel like this one is maybe a little bit more atmospheric, maybe a little bit more open in terms of the sound?
Let me ponder that. In parts, actually, let me use a different word. I think, and this is tough because it actually gets to your point of is it the sound, like the production sound, or is it the writing? I would say parts of this record are very cinematic, which I think usually refers to writing or just a feeling of like kind of a broad, kind of swelling feeling, or like a very widescreen kind of just epic, moment. And that's partially writing, but I think it's in the production a little bit too, just in the way you kind of do give certain things space. We have a moodier song, The Mystic, which was the third single that just came out recently. That's a little slight departure for us. It's got a lot more, it's slow and it has more room to breathe. And there is, if you have good headphones on and do some detail listening, there are a lot of layers to it. There's, some auxiliary percussion, and I think there's a xylophone in there, or some marimba, or some like melodic tonal mallet kind of thing. So yeah, I think, we did try to expand the sonic palette a little bit, just beyond, even though, most of it is just, guitar, bass, and drums, but there are always, in all the albums actually, have had subtle keys. They're just not, super in your face. But yeah, I think we tried to expand a little bit.
I mean, cinematic is a good word. Maybe that's why I thought of this as a concept album, because it is, listening to the album from beginning to end is a little bit like watching a film without visuals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. I feel that. Like, I think that some of them, Tarma, which, isn't a single, but people will hear it when the album comes out. That's on the second half. I get that feeling from that one too, similar to The Mystic. It just has this, like, I kind of unconscious or subconsciously just bring up images when I listen to it. It just feels like a movie.
So the album will be out in a few days. What do you guys have planned as far as live shows, maybe tours or festival appearances?
We have an album release show, which is a local show for us. It's actually in Oakland, across the bay from San Francisco. That's going to be on April 5th, and so that'll be just our chance to play for our kind of hometown audience in April. And then we are working on something that hasn't been announced yet, but soon around the album release, we'll have news for some shows that we'll do later this year. And then we're hoping, nothing concrete, but we're hoping to add to that too, and maybe get a second round of shows later in the year too. So yeah, stuff is in the works. All I can say for sure right now is the album release show, but we'll post on social media all our touring plans.
Who do you like to play with in terms of bands?
Great question. And we talk about this a lot. We think that we could fit with a lot of different bands because of the kind of straddling slightly of the genres that we do. We can, I think up till now with the limited touring we've done, we've mostly played with bands that tilt more to the trad metal side, like our traditional metal side. So, we played Hell's Heroes Fest, which I guess is kind of everything, but I would say leans a little traditional. And we toured with our friends Bewitcher, who are kind of, in the Motorhead Venom vein. So that's a little harsher, but that's to my point, is that I think we could fit with maybe not a 6-band brutal death metal package. We might be a little odd for that, but something, like, to take an easy, maybe obvious example, like some of the Euro style melodic stuff, whether it's, Septic Flesh or like a Greek, kind of symphonic band like that, or even, a Dark Tranquillity, or, more of a Gothenburg thing. Like, it's not, there's melody there, there's harshness there. We would probably sound a little more traditional for sure, and less detuned than some of those bands. But I don't think it would be too awkward. As far as who do we want to play with, or who do I want to play with? Oh, huge list. But yeah, for me, I would love to play with, kind of, because just personally, my thing is more like Euro style stuff. So, like Amorphous and, just things like this, melodic Euro style metal. But I'm open to, what have you. So we could go out with a traditional band. I feel like we always think about the crowds, like some traditional metal crowds, if they're used to only clean, like melodic, clean vocals, some of them still have a hang up about, like, what's all that growling? Like, why can't I understand it? That's an old school thing, but you do see it. Like, it's a certain kind of line in the sand. And I don't think it applies on the other side. Like, people that already listen to harsh stuff, sure, I'm sure there are plenty of people that only listen to harsh vocals, but I think that's less true. I think people that, have a wide variety and they listen to grindcore and death metal and whatever, they also listen to Iron Maiden or, the classics, because that's the foundation. So I feel, or thrash, which is kind of in between vocal styles. So long-winded way of saying, I think we could play with harsher bands and win them over because we have the harsh vocal, but then they'll get the hooks from the melodies of the guitars and hopefully enjoy that.
Yeah. I mean, blackened heavy metal has become like it's almost its own subgenre. I spoke to a band from, I don't know, maybe North Carolina or something like that, or South Carolina, who are doing kind of like a, not quite thrash, almost like an early, like, 82, 83 kind of like proto thrash sound. Oh yeah. Except, with harsh vocals. Mm-hmm. So you guys could probably do like your own mini fest of bands like that.
Yeah, of just those things. Well, a lot of people, or it seems like a few people, have mentioned Morgul Blade, who I'm familiar with very slightly, so I don't want to like misrepresent I need to explore them more, but that name has come up a lot as far as like a band that is sort of in the same pocket, the same corner of slightly harsher traditional inspired metal. So yeah, maybe it's a little micro genre that's gonna start exploding.
So by the time people hear this episode or watch it on YouTube, Cult of the Serpent Sun will be out through Season of Mist Records. Scott, please tell everyone how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, obviously, it will be out on all the usual streaming platforms, so Spotify, Apple Music, etc., Google Play, all the usual places. And then it'll be on our Bandcamp, which is Nite Metal, Nite metal.bandcamp.com, and also on the Season of Mists web store. And then also we should have some, it'll be on vinyl and CD, and then we should have some t-shirts available. I believe Seasons of Mist may already have some up, or they will when the album is drops. And then I believe we'll have some through our own Bandcamp as well. And then certainly if you are, live close to the San Francisco Bay Area and come to a show, we'll have them there. And then hopefully we'll have them in other cities as we tour later this year.
Did Season of Mist create 3 versions of the vinyl?
I should know that. I believe so. 3 or 4. There's the standard black, and then a few colorways. I think I'm actually looking at the Bandcamp now. There's like a red marbled. What else? Yeah, but I believe there are a couple color variants.
And since this episode will be fairly soon after our conversation, the variants will still be available?
They should be, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. And if people want to follow Nite online and get updates on tours and festival appearances or anything like that, what's the best way to do that? I
would say probably our Instagram account is the most active social media place for that. So that's just, at Nite Metal, NITEMETAL. And yeah, that's probably the main place where we'll post updates and info about shows and so forth. And Season of Mist, we'll cross post some of the bigger news bits from that too. So that may go out. And then, because we're in the start of this album cycle, there'll be the usual press clippings and so forth. I think the album was reviewed in Decibel among other publications this month. So yeah, keep your eyes open.
Scott, once again, you've been very generous with your time, but is there anything else you want to say?
Thanks for the opportunity. And Adrian, thanks for having me on again. It's been nice to reconnect after a couple of years and a new album. Let's see, anything specific? It's corny, but, and actually the other guys in the band have heard me say this a bunch too, but I'm just really, everyone's so cliche. Everyone says like, this is their best album and I'm so excited but it's all true. Like I am, not that I wasn't excited about the previous albums, but I think I'm, superseded that with this one. And, I hope other folks respond to it like I am. Even I'm not sick of it. It's easy to get sick of your material when you've heard it a million times. But we took a little break there after it was submitted for the production and final manufacturing. But yeah, I'm stoked. Really excited to play these songs live. Corny stuff, but yeah, really believe in it. Really excited about it, and cross my fingers that it connects with a bunch of folks.
Very cool. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you.